D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. What was that?
No, it's that background. Like when you say,
Okay.
and it's like somebody in the back, like, you know it.
You know it.
But I do need to say this. Man, we had the coolest, and I mean coolest show name in all of sports radio. DVD.
DVD, baby.
Like, that is the coolest. It just flows off the lips. DVD.
This is indeed DVD.
Yes.
Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, David Janes here with you. So we are still DVD, despite the absence of Willie Big D Donick, who is in Big D, Dallas, Texas, with the Nashville Predators. They take on the Stars on the road tonight at 7.
Yeah, here we go.
Pregame at 6.
All right. I love it. Let's
Right
do it.
here on 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie will be on later. He'll be joining the show probably around the second half of the program. We'll have Elliot Freeman from Sportsnet NHL's Insider, I should say. We will have Elliot Freeman on at 1 o'clock. I hope everybody is doing well after
Yes.
last night's epic storms. Hope everybody's safe and sound and dry. We were all awoken by the alerts on
Phones.
our phones. It was around 3 o'clock
Yes.
when they went off, and at one point, my wife's sister, my sister-in-law's girlfriend, and my 3-year-old son were all bunkered in our tiny half bathroom downstairs. Arlo was not having a good time,
I'm sure he wasn't. That's like he wanted to get back in his bed.
but we had to be safe. So I hope everybody out there is doing well. Keep in mind, roads are flooded. Don't try to pass flooded roads. I believe the saying is turn around, don't drown. So just keep that in mind as you navigate our area today. It's going to be like this, the rain that is. It's going to be like this for the next couple of days, I
Yeah.
think. Not as strong as it was last night.
Torrential.
Torrential, thank
There
you.
we
That
go.
is the word I was looking for.
Yes.
So anyway,
But I mean, I got awakened as well. Is
mhm.
it awaken or
Awoken.
Awoken. Thank you. By the storms at right around that time, because I can hear my phone going off, and then I hear in a slight distance, 45 seconds later, the kids' phones go off. So I got to go upstairs and just tell them, hey, we may have to, come downstairs in the basement. They end up coming to where I was on the main level. But man, oh man, some water got in my house. Now I got to get it repaired. I think one of the side panels on the house, some water was able to creep through. And that is the first thing when it rains that hard, because I don't know if it's not like I've had a lot of leaks in my home. I haven't, but I've had enough to whereas every time it rains, that's my first thing is to walk through the house and make sure, there's no leakage coming from the window sills or anything else. And I heard something this morning. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking like, did I leave some water on, or did I not flush the toilet or something? Like, what did I flush it and it got, stuck or something? So I'm like, okay. So I get up. I'm like, man, that sounds weird. It sounds like it's coming from the faucet. So I walk in my bathroom. And as soon as I walk in there, I'm like, this can't. I'm like, my worst fear. So I go into my shower and I look up. There's a window right there, a huge window. And I'm like, water somehow seeped in from the outside panels. I'm sure it's not sealed properly. And it got into the wood, and now it was dripping. So I had to put a towel down because it really it didn't, because it was dripping into the bathtub. How ironic that it was dripping into the bathtub, but the sound it was making. So now I got to call somebody out, come and fix it. Hopefully it wasn't it's not a big problem. And I hope others out there don't have water damage. I know some areas you probably can't help it because of where you live. But I just hope that, because water damage it's just the worst. At least for me, it's one of the worst things. So I got a little water damage. It'll be easy to fix, I'm sure. So hopefully no one else had major damage to their home.
So Metro Nashville Public Schools are closed today, but you probably already knew that. With all of the tornado warnings on your phones between 3 and 4 a.m., it's probably a pretty groggy morning for a lot of you around town. Let us help you wake up. We'll shake it out with you. That natural caffeine, right? You're probably mainlining coffee or energy drinks, but we'll attempt to shake you out of the haze after a long night in our city. So this morning, a pretty interesting trade in the NFL for all of you VFLs out there, Vols for life, of course. The Dallas Cowboys traded for Joe Milton. The Cowboys acquired Joe Milton and a 7th-round pick from the New England Patriots for a 5th-round pick, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. Joe Milton, who helped the Tennessee Titans secure the number 1 pick in the NFL draft when he started. I don't know if he actually started the game. I think Drake may have started the game, but Joe Milton played most of the game for the Patriots in the final week of the regular season against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills were resting a lot of their starters ahead of the playoffs, but Joe Milton led the Patriots to a Week 18 win, which gave the Tennessee Titans the 1st overall pick in the draft. I remember coming in the next day and saying, Joe Milton, not only a New England Patriot, an American Patriot for helping the Tennessee Titans secure the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. But when I shared this news with our DVD group chat, Derek, you said this could be good for the Titans if they want to trade Will Levis. Why don't you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, because my thing is, and maybe, as I think about it more, maybe it's the unknown rather than the known. Because I think both Will Levis and Joe Milton have similar traits. Skill sets. Both big, physical, can throw through anything, and both don't have much accuracy. They deal with that at short, intermediate routes. They deal with that problem. So, in a sense, I think both of them are sort of kind of the same quarterback in a sense. Will Levis I don't know. Would Will Levis be a little bit better? Would Joe Milton be a little bit better? I don't know. But I think they both are identical in skill set, in what they project. Not to say that it had happened, because it hasn't happened with either one of them, but because of the skill set, the potential, it does sort of project into, hey, he has an opportunity, or he has the talent to be a starting quarterback in this league. But for Will Levis, he showed that he's more of a backup than anything. And Joe Milton, he is a backup. So New England trades him because I think they're in a similar situation as the Tennessee Titans all around, period. They have their quarterback. They went out and got a veteran quarterback in Josh Dobbs to be the backup. So you got a young rookie a young second-year player now that showed some promise, but he still has a lot of development. And you were able to work out a broker deal between the Cowboys to get a 5th-round pick. Is it a compensatory?
It is.
Is their compensatory pick a 5th-round pick? Now, I don't know if Dallas would have did it had they not had that compensatory pick. Maybe they don't do it, but they did. So looking at Joe Milton, what he could potentially project to, we know he's going to be a backup as long as the Dallas, what's the quarterback? Zach Prescott. As long as Zach Prescott's there, he's going to be a backup.
By the way, the compensatory 5th-round pick is 171st overall, according to Albert Breer. So Dallas moved a pick down 46 slots to land Milton, according to Albert Breer.
So they moved down, or they gave up. They gave up.
The Cowboys are trading a compensatory 5th-round pick,
yes,
171st overall, to the Patriots for Joe Milton, and a 7th-round pick, 217th overall, that originally belonged to Tennessee.
Yeah.
So Dallas moved a pick down 46 slots to land Milton.
Okay. So if Dallas, if New England was able to broker that type of deal with a quarterback that's still pretty much unknown. Yes, he did show some flashes in the game that he played.
22 of 29 for 241 yards, a passing touchdown, and a rushing touchdown in week 18 against the Bills.
And just think last year, what was it, a 6th-round pick for Malik Williams? For Malik Willis?
They traded, the Titans acquired a 7th-round pick.
7th-round pick
for Malik Willis. Joe Milton was a 6th-round pick in the draft.
Exactly. So you look at all of that and you say, those two quarterbacks, Will Levis is not the bee's knees, but if I'm looking, those two quarterbacks aren't better than the one that we have as our backup. So could the Titans possibly get a deal like Dallas deal, or can they get a deal a little bit better? But it may have to be with a team that has 2 picks in a round.
What's interesting is, as your point is that Will Levis has starting experience in the NFL. Joe Milton does not. At least,
significant
yes.
Starting.
If I recall correctly, he did not start the game against the Bills. I think Drake may have started the game and Joe Milton came in. I'll have to double check that. The flip side of that is with Milton, there's still the tantalizing potential, right? You still don't know exactly what you have in Joe Milton, and that can be enticing to a team. We've talked about this before. Now, Will Levis, he has more film than Joe Milton, and there could still be some potential there. But with Will Levis, you may think he's more or closer to a finished product than Joe Milton, right? So maybe the Cowboys thought, hey, we could unlock this guy. There are teams who may convince themselves that they can unlock Will Levis. But I'm wondering if the fact that we have seen Will Levis as a starter for, a season and a half, and it hasn't gone well, I'm wondering if that actually drops the price, because it's like, we've seen what Will Levis can do as a starting quarterback. It hasn't been good. But then again, if you're trading for him, you're not trading for him to be your starting quarterback.
No, you're trading for him to be your backup and to develop him more. So what is that worth to you? To have a backup with some experience at being a starter in this league. And listen, he wasn't great, but he did have some games where they were just off the chart. One in particular, his first game of his NFL career. So you look at that and you look at, can we develop him more than what he is? But he's always, at least here, he's always going to be our backup. I think that's what teams, if you're making a trade with the Titans, I think that's what you got to sort of think about.
And by the way, Joe Milton did not start the game against the Bills in week 18. He played most of it, but he did not start the game.
Yeah. So when you're if there's a potential trade with Will Levis, which I think once we get into the draft, I think that's going to be, it's going to come into more of a clear picture. With Will Levis, what the Titans are going to do with it. Because right now, they have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and we assume they're going to take another with the first pick in the draft. So now you have 4 quarterbacks. All 3 of them behind the rookie has experience. Now, which one are you willing to keep? Are you going to let it be a true battle for the backup? Or are you going to, take one of these guys and try to work out a deal? I think the best deal you get is with Will Levis, because he has those things you can't teach. If you can just hone it in, and it's sort of like what Trevor said, not to that extent, but there's going to be the offensive coordinator or GM or head coach saying, listen, we can develop that guy. We got sort of an older starter. We can develop him over the next couple of years, and he could potentially be the starter once this guy sort of moves over.
This is interesting also from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. On the Jimmy Johnson chart, the 171st pick, which is what the Patriots are getting for Joe Milton, is worth 23 points. And the 217th pick is worth 4.2. So the trade value for New England here is 18.8 points, roughly equivalent to the 181st pick. Milton was drafted 193rd last year. Also, Milton's lone start or game played dropped the Pats from 1st to 4th in the draft order, a value loss of 1,200 points. That's the same value as the 12th overall pick in the draft, which is Dallas's first rounder.
Okay, Sam. You had me all the way until the last part.
Okay, so the first part. So the Cowboys are trading a compensatory 5th round pick, which is 171.
Yeah, which is 20 what?
Is worth 23 points.
Okay.
They are getting Joe Milton and a 7th round pick, which is 217. 217 on the Jimmy Johnson chart is worth 4.2.
So it's 4 points. So it's 20, whatever it is, minus 4.2.
So the trade value for New England is 18.8 points.
Okay.
Roughly equivalent to the 181st pick,
which Milton
was drafted 193rd.
So they got better.
They got a slight return on their investment. The second part was Milton's lone start or game played dropped the Patriots from 1st to 4th in the draft order.
I see what you're saying.
A value loss of 12.
So it really wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. What they're saying is, in a big scheme of things, you did all these moves where the only thing you had to do was not win, because by winning, it basically erased any gain that you may have received in the trade. Sending Milton to the Cowboys.
Right. And if the Titans do trade Will Levis, they are absolutely not going to get a return on their investment. They used a high 2nd round pick to draft him. They traded picks to move up to that high 2nd round pick to draft him. They spent 2 years attempting to develop him. It did not work. So you are going to be trading Will Levis for pennies on the dollar. But at the end of the day, you may decide something is better than nothing if we choose not to keep Will Levis.
Hey, what's the old song? Know when to hold him, know when to fold him.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you got to know when to fold this one.
And know when to walk away.
Yeah, and walk away from. You got to fold it and walk away, man. Because at this point, especially if you draft Cam Ward, at that point, he has no future in your organization. So do you try to facilitate a trade before the draft? Because I think once people see that you've drafted Cam Ward, if indeed that's what you do, doesn't the price drop for Will Levis then? Because now you got, in a sense, you don't have to move him. You can still get, but you are more inclined to not have him on your roster by then.
Right.
Yeah. So if I'm a team, I'm not giving you, say, before the draft, I would have given you, let's just say, a 4th round. Now I'm not giving you a 4th rounder. I'm just not, especially if you want to unload them. So I guess that deal, the Milton deal, I think possibly could have, sort of changed the view that the Titans have for Will Levis, because what's coming out is no one's made calls and we haven't sent the call out or text or anything. Or did he say communicate?
Chad Brinker said in the interview with Jim Wyatt that they haven't received calls on Will Levis and they haven't made calls on Will Levis.
See, that's the thing right there. It's word. It's all wording. They haven't received a call, but that doesn't mean somebody didn't send them a text or something like that.
Let me find the exact quote. No, we have not contacted anybody.
Okay,
and nobody has contacted us about Will Levis.
There we go. That's better right there. That right there.
It could be a text. It could be a phone call. Nobody has contacted them, allegedly.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's, if as we start to get closer to the draft, if this is the route we're taking, and Will Levis has no future with this team, I think it would be better to try to trade him before the draft, um, and try to get as much because I think the once you make that first pick, and people are not raving. I could see if this was a different draft um, year where you know the high talent or prospects are in droves here. Then you're waiting till draft day, and you may be able to, not strong arm somebody, but say, hey, listen, this person over here wants to move up to this spot to get, and so it's better for you. But I think in this situation, because the draft isn't rich in like, elite players or all pro players, then waiting during the draft may not get you as much as you would have gotten had you made the deal before the draft.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on VFL, Vol for Life, Joe Milton being traded from the Patriots to the Cowboys. Could it be a blueprint of sorts for a potential Will Levis trade? 615-737-1025. Coming up next, speaking of quarterbacks, Brian Callahan had a fascinating interview at the NFL league meetings earlier this week. I want to play those cuts for all of you and talk about what it could mean for the Titans and the potential drafting of Cam Ward. 615-737-1025. This Saturday, don't miss Nashville Super Speedway's pre-race concert contest. Nashville's next rising star at Dierks Bentley's Whiskey Row from 1 to 5 p.m. The contest will be emceed by our very own Joe Dubin, and special guest GJ Mojo will keep the crowd hyped all afternoon. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events. Tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on Gwinnett. Pregame begins at 5:50. First pitch is at 6:05. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Dunick will be along shortly once he wraps up his broadcasting duties with the Predators, who are in Dallas to take on the Stars tonight. So yesterday, Derek, I stumbled across an interview that Brian Callahan did with Kevin Clark, who is the host of the This Is Football podcast. You've probably seen Kevin Clark on shows like Around the Horn. I also think he works for the Omaha Productions team. That's Peyton Manning and Eli Manning's production team, I believe. But if you are a football fan, you are probably familiar with Kevin Clark. And Kevin Clark sat down with a number of people at the NFL meetings this past week, or earlier this week, I should say, including Chad Brinker. I listened to the interview with Brinker. It wasn't as insightful as the interview with Brian Callahan. But Kevin Clark sat down with Kevin Clark at these meetings in Florida. And he's had some really interesting things to say about quarterback development. And I think that's important, obviously, because we all tend to believe that the Titans are going to draft a quarterback, Cam Ward, with the first overall pick. So I'm going to play these cuts for you. And Derek, who's forgotten more about football than I will ever know, I want Derek to analyze these comments. So here is the first thing that Brian Callahan said. Kevin Clark asked him about his time with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati and how he worked with Joe Burrow in terms of development. So this is the first cut I want to play from Brian Callahan on Joe Burrow and his development.
How much did Joe inform your feelings on quarterback development, how to do it, when to sit a guy, what to throw at him in training camp, the whole deal?
It's a huge experience for me that I'm going to lean on quite a bit if that's the direction we end up going, because Joe wasn't the Joe he is now. I mean, there was still development that occurred. There was still things that he got better at. There was still things that he didn't do as well as he does now. And then just getting that up to speed. I actually went back and watched because it was COVID, so we had all this Zoom time and we recorded.
Oh,
so I went back and watched all of those first handful of meetings just to more for perspective on like I see Joe as I saw him when I left, which is this, top of the league, best quarterback in football, arguably.
Rich as hell.
Very, very wealthy now. But I went back and watched all of those just to see where he was in that process. And it was good for me to see, because you don't remember that sometimes on the amount of work that it took to get to where he was. And a lot of that's a credit to Joe, but there was definitely things that we did developmentally, both in how we taught the scheme, how we introduced it, what we asked of him, how we structured game plans that first year. And those are all things that I've sort of revisited just to have some perspective on what it looks like.
So that was Brian Callahan talking about his time with Joe Burrow at the beginning of Burrow's career in Cincinnati. I thought it was interesting, Derek, that Brian Callahan told Kevin Clark that he went back and watched some of these recorded Zoom meetings that he had with Joe Burrow early in Burrow's career. And he talked about, I've revisited that time of my career just in case that's the road we go down. But what did you think of Callahan's answer there on quarterback development?
I think what it does is it gives you an opportunity to see how you interacted with the first pick, or potential first pick in the draft. What questions did you ask him? What was his answers? Because now it's almost like you use it as a roadmap, because you see what Joe Burrow is now, and you go back and you say, well, what questions did I ask him? How did he respond? That'll tell me more, about what he's going to be, depending on how he answered the question. And now you can compare the two. Maybe I asked him a question about coverages and how do you read coverages? And then now look 2, 3 years later, it all morphed into something that, something good because how he saw it early on and once we develop and how he is now, the two things are they're tangible things that I can go back to and say, this is what I saw in this quarterback. These are the questions that I asked of him. And then the next part for me is, and I think this is important for not just quarterbacks, but just, when you're drafting a guy that high in the first round, second round, whatever, don't tell me what he can't do. Show me what he can do. Let's work on that while developing, him as a player. So those things he can't do now, he will be able to do later. But let's focus on what he does well now. Because if we can focus on that and hone in on that, that brings confidence. That breeds confidence. Now we can sort of move into that other space. But I think sometimes this is my system. You're going to work within my system. And sometimes some quarterbacks don't work well like that. Some quarterbacks, especially young players, you put them in a familiar setting. Give them familiar verbiage as much as you possibly can. And then allow that quarterback to go out there because now he may end up being the best version of himself a lot quicker than you saying, you know what? This is how I'm going to develop you. You're going to run my offense, and it's going to be totally different from what you ran. Now, sometimes because of what you're running, you try to incorporate as much as you can, but you can't incorporate it all because it throws off your whole offense. But if you're running something similar, then you got to find a way to make it easier for him to take the verbiage he was hearing in college to translate it to the NFL and to see it the same way.
That's an interesting point because that's another thing that Brian Callahan talked with Kevin Clark, and we'll get to those comments on the other side. 615-737-1025. Actually, before we go to break, one texter said, were they in a jungle or zoo or something? No, they were outside in, I guess, a courtyard at this hotel in Florida. So a lot of birds chirping and
That's
stuff.
a fancy hotel.
It is a fancy hotel, and we talked about this yesterday when we were playing a clip from Diana Rossini, who was also at these league meetings. I would like to draft a motion that all insiders have to do their reports outside of a tropical locale where you have all of these birds chirping. Or you can just imagine Kevin Clark and Brian Callahan sitting down at the Rainforest Cafe at Opry Mills. Your choice.
That's what I was thinking more. Let's go Rainforest Cafe.
615-737-1025. We'll play some more of this interview with Brian Callahan and Kevin Clark. Some interesting insight from Brian Callahan coming up next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. It's time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce we will be back at Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th, to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. By the way, during the break, the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning, which is in effect until 2:45. So just keep that in mind as you're traveling. Don't try to drive through a flooded road. We do not want you to be stranded. So please proceed with caution after last night's torrential rain. Okay, so we just played the first cut from Brian Callahan's interview with Kevin Clark from the This Is Football podcast, live from the NFL meetings, not a Rainforest Cafe. Although I submit to the NFL that their next meeting should be held at the Rainforest Cafe. All of the front office people can stay at Opryland. It's a short walk across the street through the parking lot. They can go to Rainforest Cafe. Imagine them having serious conversations during those lightning storms that they have at Rainforest Cafe.
I mean, oh, I don't have my mic on.
You're just so entranced by the idea of Rainforest Cafe.
Yeah, I'm not last time I went to Rainforest Cafe, the kids were, man, they were not over. So we were here. So they were not over.
I was
the age of 5.
I was there within the past month.
Yeah, when I went in there, I cannot, and listen.
You have a 3-year-old.
And
So, I
listen,
mean,
I do have a 3-year-old.
Rainforest Cafe is I'm sure it's a great establishment. But it was just it was too much going on. It's too dim in there. So I can't see the food. And it's just too much. I started thinking too much. And then I don't want to eat anything.
you hear a grill out of nowhere, just like, what's going on?
I just, it's a little bit too much. And it seems like it hasn't changed since the first day
It hasn't.
Yeah, so
it absolutely hasn't.
So no new chair, no new seats, no new nothing.
No new animal sounds?
Exactly. Y'all ain't redo the aquarium or anything. I mean, come on now.
Shout out to Rainforest.
Yeah,
Cafe,
I mean,
man.
for
shout
those
out
who
to
go out
Rainforest Cafe.
Is there like a acronym for it now? Do y'all call it something else instead of the long range tree forest?
Like there's a
RTF. RTF.
Hey, yo, fan, let's go to RTF.
Let's go to RTF.
I don't know.
Pull up to RTF. 5.
But I digress. So let's get back to Brian Callahan and Kevin Clark, who were not at a Rainforest Cafe.
Uh-huh.
They were outside in Florida, hence all of the chirping birds. So we played the clip about Brian Callahan's experience with Joe Burrow and how he is leaning on that experience for what could come in 3 weeks when the Tennessee Titans have the number 1 pick in the draft. Here is the second clip I want to play from Brian Callahan on young quarterbacks playing right away.
I mean, that's how I see it, is that most of these guys are picked high to play. And I think the instances of, the Mahomes and the Rodgers, those were very different team setups then too. Kansas City had a good football team with Alex Smith. And so it wasn't as imperative that the pick hit right away, which I don't think that's majority of cases. Usually you're counting on that guy to play. And so there is a lack of developmental time because these guys do get thrown in so fast and they have to perform quickly.
Yeah.
The other part of it is, if you want to talk, another discussion for another day, is offensive line development, right? Maybe even harder at this point. But that's where these guys got to come in and they got to play. And so from a development perspective, I think what you saw, even what we did with Joe Burrow, I think what you saw Cliff do with Jaden Daniels is you find as many things that you can find to where they can have success early and allow them to play fast and play confident, and you sort of fill it in as you go, and you stack those lessons and you stack those things that maybe they weren't as good at that you have to develop. You kind of introduce them slowly as you let them get off the ground.
So that was Brian Callahan about young quarterbacks playing right away. And if the Titans draft Cam Ward, he's playing right away.
Yeah, he is. If you just look back, last year you had 3 guys play, well, really 4 guys play right away. That's Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and Bo Nix.
Correct.
The year before that, you had 3 guys, Young, Stroud, and Richardson. I don't think Richardson should have been a starter right away, but they did, and you see where they are at now. Bryce Young, he wasn't surrounded by enough talent, especially the offensive line. And you see what the Carolina Panthers were not able to do. 22, there was Kenny Pickett didn't start right away. And then when he did start, he showed that he wasn't a starting quarterback in this league. 21, you go back to Trevor Lawrence, obviously started. And then 20, which Brian Callahan is talking about, you had Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Herbert all starting early. Jordan Love was the only guy, I'm talking about the first round, because Jalen Hurts ended up starting right away too, I believe, or somewhere within that first year. But the top picks, all of them started right away. Even the year before that, Kyler Murray, I believe he started right away. Daniel Jones, did he start right away?
I think he was on the bench with Eli Manning.
Yeah, he may have been on the bench. Dwayne Haskins, I don't think I'm not sure he started right away, the late Dwayne Haskins. I don't know if he started right away or not. He was the top 15 pick. But when you draft a quarterback that high, especially within the last, say, 10 years, they are looking for you to be a starter day one. That's why we are drafting you in the top 10. Any guy you draft in the top 10 should be a day one starter in your mind. It doesn't, in this day and age, the quarterback is no exception. He's not an exception to this. Even though you want him out there, even though you want him to develop, they still are pushing these guys to be day one starters rather than, sitting back. Now, we've seen our few occasions, most notably Jordan Love, where he sat 2 years, I believe, and then was able to take over the job because of the trade of Aaron Rodgers. But as many, instances I can give you that it works, I can give you the same that it doesn't work. So I guess it all depends on, really, when you looked at Joe Burrow, where was your team at? Were you going to put him in a position to succeed or fail? Or were you putting him in a position you knew he can rise above? That was Joe Burrow. And he had, even though the first year wasn't great and he ended up getting hurt, but he still was able to rise above, some of the things that the Cincinnati Bengals, put themselves in as far as organizational wise out there on the field. So when you look at the Titans, if indeed they do draft Cam Ward, and your decision is play him early, let's wait. What situation are you putting him in, for one? And can he develop within that situation, or can he rise above? You think he's that good, as you did Joe Burrow, that he can rise above that, as Chicago thought with Caleb Williams, that he could rise above that? Because Chicago's whole roster wasn't good. Now, they had some good receivers, but their roster as a whole wasn't great. Offensive line was horrid. So if you do draft Caleb Williams, are you putting him in a position where he can come in and is something that works for him? Or you believe he's just that good that he's going to be able to rise above whatever you got going on as an organization?
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on what Brian Callahan has to say about quarterback development. We do have one more clip we're going to play. Coming up next, 615-737-1025. A reminder that D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick is proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I also want to tell all of you that this week's Nashville's best deal comes from Bad Axe Throwing Nashville, downtown's largest axe throwing venue and your go-to spot for food, fun, and vibes. Enjoy panoramic views of the city, a killer soundtrack, craft cocktails from the full bar, and a Northwoods-inspired menu with a Southern twist. This week, score half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals and grab yours now. D-Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick will join us shortly. The Predators are in Dallas visiting the Stars. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 1025, 1063 The Game. One quick Predators note to pass along from our friend Max Hers. Matthew Wood, one of the Predators' recent first-round draft picks who has joined the team. He signed his entry-level contract. He is with the Predators in Dallas. However, according to Max Hers, Matthew Wood is not expected to make his NHL debut tonight against the Stars. So just wanted to pass that along to all you Predators fans out there. But let's continue our conversation about Brian Callahan's interview with Kevin Clark on the This Is Football podcast. So we've played a couple of clips so far. We played a clip about Brian Callahan talking about quarterback development generally, his experience with Joe Burrow, and how that is informing how he could develop Cam Ward. He also discussed with Kevin Clark, young quarterbacks playing right away. Here is where I think Derek is the most interesting comment. Brian Callahan was talking to Kevin Clark about transitioning from college to the NFL and ways to make those quarterbacks most comfortable. Kevin Clark brings up running the types of plays in the NFL that the players excelled doing in college. Here is what Brian Callahan had to say to Kevin Clark.
Well, yeah, our goal, even I've probably said it before and at some point, maybe even to you, is our goal is to make year one in the NFL feel like year 3 at LSU.
Yeah.
And so
You said it in print, though. It's a dying medium. Now we can do it on podcast.
Yeah, there we go. But I think that's what the difference was, is that we took a lot of feedback on what he did well at LSU and tried to incorporate as much of that as possible. Now we have a lot of the same things. And so it's more, do you like this concept? Yes, I do. Okay, well, let's just do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And that allows you to get off the ground a bit. I think Washington did a great job of that as well.
So that was Brian Callahan. He was obviously referring to Joe Burrow, year 1 in the NFL, being year 3 at LSU. And it reminded me of something that Cam Ward said, I believe, at the Combine. He said he was able to watch some of the Titans games this past season and that a lot of their route concepts were similar to the ones that they run in Miami. So Cam Ward said, if I was drafted there, I just think it would be plug and play. So this idea, you were talking about it a little bit before, Derek, this idea of incorporating what Cam Ward did well at Miami and bringing it to Tennessee, again, assuming it's Cam Ward. What were your thoughts on Brian Callahan there?
Listen, he wants to, and I think this is, especially now within the last 3 or 4 years, this is where sort of offenses are sort of leaning toward. It's sort of this, we're going to implement some of the college game and how they call it in what we're doing. Now, listen, route concepts are basically the same across the board. If you have a 3-by-1, you're flooding one side, you want to make sure you have an underneath route coming, from the backside. If you have triple, ends, if you're running a 3-by-1 to the strong side, you have triple ends you're running. You typically want to have a post or go route to sort of clear that stuff out. A lot of times you're not going to have a slant because those level throws they're not 3-step throws. So you want to have your routes, the concept, so they all mirror up to one another as far as your progression. So when Cam says that, the route combinations they are the same, but it's not just, it's the verbiage. It's, it's things like that, the motioning. It's the, the little small things within the play that we got to get you up to speed. And we're going to try to find as many commonalities with your college scheme that our pro scheme has. It may be, a lot of it may be the same. Even some of the verbiage is the same. But we got to find those small things that will help you as a player sort of expedite this development curve, because that's what it's all about. How quickly can your franchise quarterback develop? Now, it may take some a year to develop, but even with that, look at CJ Stroud. He took a step back last year. Okay. So just because you start off like a CJ Stroud or Jaden Daniels doesn't mean that, okay, you're on your way. You may have a setback or somewhat. But it's that continued development of him learning his offense first, learning it from a standpoint of how can we incorporate some of these little things that you did in college into the program, into our system. Is it even feasible to do that? If not, then how can we put plays in that you feel comfortable with, or combinations that you feel comfortable with? But to say it's just, I don't think he understands how hard it is. Because when guys say just plug in, I can just this if it was that easy, there would be more elite quarterbacks than there are.
You're talking about Cam Ward.
Yeah, I'm talking about Cam
Okay,
Ward.
not
So
Brian Callahan.
not Brian Callahan. Brian Callahan understands this is not a plug and play. It's a, let's find out what you do good. Let's implement that into what we're doing. And the other stuff we'll develop as time goes on. But as long as we can get you comfortable underneath center, get you comfortable at seeing defenses, that's what we want at the beginning. And again, some guys pick that stuff up quicker than others. But I think the framework is, let's draw or let's pull some of these things that he did in college well. Let's see if we can, work that into our offense. Let him gain some confidence. Let him see defenses, but all the while developing him and adding more and more of our offense. And the things he can't do, don't even try to incorporate it. Don't. Let's master what we have now, and then we'll go from there.
So now that you've heard all of those clips from Brian Callahan talking to Kevin Clark at the NFL meetings earlier this week, and what you know of Brian Callahan just from watching the Titans, take all of that, put it together. How confident are you that if the Titans draft Cam Ward, that Brian Callahan can properly develop him?
Oh, man. How confident am I that he can develop Cam Ward? I'm not sure. I'm really not, because I see what he's trying to do, what he was trying to do with Will Levis. Can I blame that on Brian Callahan, that Will Levis didn't develop? Because you visually saw like what he was trying to do with Will Levis. So much so, like when he comes off the side, like, dude, what are you doing? I'm telling you, like, if you just do this, we'll be good. So you see what he's trying to show him, but Will just didn't pick it up. So is that on Brian Callahan, or is that just on Will Levis?
I've said this before, that I wonder if Will Levis is beyond development, for lack of a better phrase. To your point, I am certain, and you mentioned it with Brian Callahan, he talked about it over the course of the season, that Brian Callahan was telling him the right things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Will Levis was not doing them. So is the coach responsible? Absolutely. I am not absolving Brian Callahan of blame from what we saw from Will Levis last season. But I also wonder how many coaches could have gotten through to Will Levis. So if I'm putting together, if I'm putting together a chart of blame, I would give more to Will Levis than I would to Brian Callahan. I don't know the exact number, but I would lean more toward Levis than I would Callahan in terms of who was wrong, who made this the way it was.
Yeah, because I go back to what I said earlier. There are two guys essentially out there, whether it be quarterback or just player, period. There's either that guy that helps elevate your program or help elevate your roster, or guys that may need some development in that department and may not ever reach, a point where they are doing more good than not. So Are you helping the program or are you not? One or the other. You helping the organization or are you not? I'm not sure if Will Levis falls in the category of helping the organization. No matter what Brian Callahan did last year, whatever he tried to do, it didn't work. And it seemed like Will Levis, because Brian Callahan even talked about this. It's about we're sitting in the meetings, we're going over everything, and Will Levis got it. And he can write it on the board. He can talk about it in a way that is understandable. And he knows what's going on. Then we go out to the practice field, and it's like, okay, he sees it. But then when we get in the game, it's something different. So is that Brian Callahan's fault? No, it's not. Because my thing is, I'm a firm believer of this. If you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. Now, some guys may have it and need development, but I can't develop a guy to a point where he's a starting quarterback or starting player if he doesn't have it in him. I can't develop. That's why there are starters and there's backups.
Rick is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Rick, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Yeah, guys, I don't have any illusions that Levis may not be an elite top-level quarterback, but I also blame the coach for having the worst offensive line in the NFL. And if you have I don't care who you are as a quarterback, when you are running for your life basically on every play, you can't gather your thoughts to try to implement what you're being taught. So I think that the coach was probably telling him the right thing to do. The problem is Levis never had any confidence that he could stay upright for 2 seconds or 2.5 or 3 seconds to implement anything. So I put the blame 50-50, but I lean more that the coaching and putting the team together around him failed miserably.
Thank you for the call, Rick. And I hear what he's saying.
Yeah.
The offensive line, specifically the right tackle position, the Titans blew it on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Do I mostly blame Brian Callahan for that? I would mostly blame Ran Carthon for that. He's the one that puts the team together, or did put the team together. But the Titans have addressed offensive line significantly this offseason. They signed Dan Moore, which allows J.C. Latham to move to right tackle. Kevin Zeitler is a veteran right guard. So on paper, this offensive line looks much better than it has in recent years, although the bar to clear is very, very low. The bar is on the floor. The ceiling is the roof. The bar is on the floor. So I hear that, but I mean, the play of the offensive line, Brian Callahan, I don't give him the lion's share of the blame on that, because although he does play, I assume, played a role in personnel in terms of, which players the Titans went out and got. I mean, it was Ran Carthon who mostly screwed up the offensive line. So to Rick's point, as we all know, the offensive line is critical to the development of a quarterback. The Titans have apparently put themselves in a position where if they do draft Cam Ward, they have a better offensive line theoretically in front of them.
Yes. And it's hard to disagree with what the caller said, because he's basically stating fact. This was a horrible offensive line. There's no way around it. So,
and that was part of Trevor Mattich's point when he said to Jared the other day, defending Will Levis, that behind that offensive line, no quarterback could possibly succeed.
But I go back to what I said just a few minutes ago. There are two type of guys in this league. That's where there are starters and backups. There are guys that can elevate your program no matter what's going around. And there are guys that can't. And they end up being, some of them are not on the team, but they can elevate it to a point where they become just good role players. They're not starters. They're guys that we need you as a backup. You're still a good player, but you're not as good as these guys that are starters right now. So I get what the caller said, what Trevor said, because those are facts. I can't dispute those. But I look at Caleb Williams. And no, they didn't have a great season. Their offensive line was not good. But you saw it in Caleb Williams. It wasn't because of him that the Chicago Bears were losing. Their offensive line was horrendous. That kid barely had any time. At times, it was worse than Will Levis. He was running around for his life. But it wasn't because of he wasn't doing these stupid things, these bonehead things. I don't mean to call Will. I'm not calling Will Levis stupid, but I'm saying these boneheaded mistakes that you're making over and over again. You look at Jaden Daniels. I mean, his offensive line wasn't great. It was okay. But even he was able to uplift his franchise. CJ Stroud, he didn't play behind a great offensive line, but he was able to rise above that and lift up the organization. I can go on with quarterbacks. You know, prime example is Patrick Mahomes. We know who Patrick Mahomes is. His offensive line was horrid, but they got to the Super Bowl, didn't they? Why? Because Patrick Mahomes. He was able to lift that organization up. That's all I'm saying with Will Levis. I'm not saying that he can't be a career backup in this league because I've seen a lot worse than Will Levis, believe me, and they've been backup. So Will Levis, he's good in that department as far as as long as he do the right things, he will last a long time in this league as a backup. But he doesn't elevate. He doesn't. Even with a bad offensive line, he didn't elevate. He couldn't hit. Calvin Ridley was running deep down the field several times. He couldn't hit it, and he had time to throw the football. Making bonehead mistakes after the OC just told OC/head coach just told you, don't do that. And you do it not once, but twice. So those are the things that you're right. I can't dispute the bad offensive line. I can't dispute that. You are absolutely right. But I also know that Will Levis, unless he does a 180 and is noticeable, he's not your starting quarterback.
615-737-1025. Now that you've heard the clips from Brian Callahan with Kevin Clark talking about quarterback development, how confident are you that if the Titans draft Cam Ward, that Brian Callahan can adequately develop him? 615-737-1025. A reminder that our program, D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, is proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We will take your reaction on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and now, of course, Willie Big D. Donick. He's here. Hi, Willie.
Yo, yo. In the flesh.
I just do it
Hey,
now
Willie.
because it gets a rise out of Derek. And I won't be able to do it again. Well, after tonight.
After he leaves.
Yeah, so.
there you go. Is the weather good there, or is it not?
Well, it's not great, but it's I understand there was a lot last night, and I was up late. You know, I was making sure my family was aware and everything like that. And boy, I know it was a rough night for a lot of people. So I've seen some of the pictures of the water going everywhere. I know people are having trouble on the west side just getting around. So my thoughts are with everybody back there. So a little windy, a little rainy here, but nothing compared to what's going on back home. So.
And remember, the National Weather Service has a flash flood warning in effect until 2:45, at least 2:45. So although it does not appear to be raining outside our window, there are still plenty of flooded roads in our area. So if you come across one, please don't attempt to drive through it. Save yourself the trouble. So, Willie, we've been talking about Brian Callahan. I clipped some of his interview with Kevin Clark at the NFL meetings earlier this week. Some really interesting thoughts from Brian Callahan on quarterback development. So the question that I'm giving to all of our listeners at 615-737-1025 is, after hearing those clips, how confident are you that Brian Callahan, if the Titans do indeed draft Cam Ward, how confident are you that Brian Callahan could adequately develop him? Phil texted and said, you said Willie Big what now? If you've missed it, Willie is in Dallas, which is affectionately known as Big D. So I've been calling him Willie Big D Donick for the past couple of days. Pause. Willie, pause. Big D, pause. Donick. Nevertheless, I have to retire it after today because the Predators won't be back in Dallas again this season. So Joey from Bellevue texted him and said, why does Callahan compare every situation he's in to Joe Burrow? Burrow is a superstar. If every team had the secret formula to develop a rookie quarterback, we wouldn't see all these coaches getting fired. Well, I'm sure the reason why is because it's a direct experience that Brian Callahan had. He was with the Cincinnati Bengals when the Bengals drafted Joe Burrow with the first overall pick. So he's now in a position where he's going to be coaching the first overall pick, assuming the Titans don't trade it. So either way, that is why I assume Brian Callahan always refers to Joe Burrow. I know that Joe Burrow, as Joey from Bellevue said, is a superstar in this league. But it's an experience that Brian Callahan had, and therefore that's why he leans on it. But Jared from Spring Hill said the establishment failed Levis more than he failed the Titans. Billy Denham's, Will Levis, did have his warts too, but we didn't see them under Vrabel. Between Joe Burrow himself, Brian Callahan, and Zach Taylor, what percentage do you project Callahan had on the influence of Joe Burrow? Willie, why don't you start?
It's a really good question. I don't know how I could accurately answer that. I would say it's a significant percentage. I don't know if I could put 40, 50, whatever, but I think he clearly had an influence, and I think it probably helped Brian Callahan's career. I think that you could probably say, what percentage influence did Joe Burrow have on Brian Callahan? But I think overall, just my feel listening to Brian Callahan talk football, I think he knows what he's doing. I think he is a good coaching prospect. And like young player prospects, you don't always see the best in the first year. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years. And of course, as a coach, you got to have the players. You got to have the Jimmies and Joes to make it work. But I like him. And I think we can all say that Mike Vrabel was a better head coach in year 2, 3, 4 than he was in year 1, 2. I think he grew into the role. And so I know there's a lot of people saying, well, if they have a bad year, he's going to be the scapegoat. And maybe that will happen. But I my sense is he's a good coach, and I do think he's probably learned a lot from quarterbacks he's been around, not just Joe Burrow, but a lot of them. And I think Joe Burrow was probably the first one that Brian Callahan actually did have a chance to shape a little bit, right? When he was a younger coach and he was around Peyton Manning and some of the other guys, Matthew Stafford, all these guys, he probably didn't really have a chance to shape those guys. Those guys were more of the finished product, and he was learning from them. And I think there was a chance for him to have a hand in Joe Burrow's development, but that's just my view from afar.
What's interesting, and I was thinking about this the other day,
Mhm.
there's this narrative, right? That if a team drafts a young quarterback, that the coach of that team should be afforded a longer leash. And I've made this argument as well, that if the Titans draft Cam Ward, I'm hoping they will give Brian Callahan some leeway, because you don't want to impact the development of Cam Ward by starting him with Brian Callahan and then firing Brian Callahan if things don't go well, and then inserting another coach with maybe another philosophy. But then it hit me. It's not a perfect comparison, but it did hit me that the past 3 quarterbacks who were drafted number 1 overall, their head coaches were fired in season during their rookie seasons. Caleb Williams last season, Matt Eberflus was fired, I believe, after 12 games. Bryce Young, Frank Reich was fired halfway through his first season, right, with the Carolina Panthers. And the same thing can be said about Urban Meyer with Trevor Lawrence. And by the way, Frank Reich and Urban Meyer are the only coaches in the common draft era since 1967 to not finish their first season with a team after drafting a quarterback number 1 overall. So the last 3 quarterbacks who were drafted number 1 overall, their head coaches were fired in season. I found that to be interesting because of this idea about, you have to give the coach some leeway, right, to develop this young quarterback. But the last 3 instances of a quarterback being drafted number 1 overall, their coaches were fired in season.
Well, you look at the
and to be clear, Urban Meyer specifically was an abject disaster.
Yeah, that
with
was
the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, that was just all around for Urban Meyer.
But and it seemed like the coaching situation in Carolina with Frank Reich and the staff he put together, that seemed to be a mess too. That's why, again, they're the only coaches in the common draft era to not finish their first season with a team after drafting a quarterback number 1 overall. But the point still stands that the past 3 number 1 overall quarterbacks did not have the same coach at the end of their first season as they did at the beginning.
Yeah. And this is what I think Brian Callahan, and I'm sure he does, but is the organization behind him, or is the organization standing in front of him?
Remember those comments that we read from Burke Nihil, I want to say, about we're going to hold them accountable.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, are you standing behind me and pushing me forward and say, hey, listen, we know because of the roster construction, we know this is not going to be an ideal season for you. But if we see the development, we're going to keep on pushing this thing forward with you. Or are they standing in front of him saying, hey, listen, yeah, we understand what's going on. But if you're not getting things the way we want you to get them, we're going to fire you. Face to face, we're going to fire you. It's more in a combative state right now. So which one is the Tennessee Titans in when it comes to Brian Callahan? Are they in a supportive, standing behind you, pushing you forward? We can do it. We're going to get this thing done. Or are they in opposition? Or are they standing in front of you, combative? Like, if you don't get this done, you out of here. And I mean, if we don't see change in the middle of the season, you'll be the 4th guy that get fired after we draft the quarterback first overall, within the last 4 years or 5 years.
By the way, Kevin on our text line says, love Callahan, super nice guy, very open to questions, maybe too open, but mark it down, he'll be the 4th. By week 14, Bones Fossil will be the head coach of Cam Ward.
Listen, I can't.
Well, but let's not forget that what happened in Cincinnati when they had Joe Burrow. they were really bad the first year.
Well, he got
They
hurt
were
too.
really bad. He did get hurt, but they were not doing well with him in there. In fact, I have to look back, but I think Brian Callahan has been through a situation where they were not good for a while.
He was
but-
2-7-1 as a starter in his first season. Joe
But
Burrow.
what the year before too, that same coaching staff was around, and I think they earned the first pick in the draft because they were bad.
They were
correct?
2-14 in 2019.
But the continuity, the sticking with it, right? By that same logic, they should have fired Wilson. Am I saying that right? Who's
Zach Wilson.
Zach Taylor.
Taylor.
Zach
Zach
Taylor.
Taylor.
Not to be
Zach
confused
Wilson,
with
Zach
Zach
Taylor.
Wilson.
Yes.
Zach Wilson, right? I knew I had that wrong. But Zach Taylor, by the same logic, should have been fired halfway into Joe Burrow's first season. But they didn't do that. They stuck with him, and they had a nice run. The Bengals are hardly considered the smartest organization in the NFL, but they were patient, and they saw the success. I agree. I don't think it's good if you were to bring in Cam Ward, a rookie quarterback, and then change course and throw different. That is a common mistake that's made a lot with quarterbacks, where they end up with 2 or 3 different coordinators, 2 or 3 different head coaches, and it's hard to get a grasp of what they are.
No, you're right. I think that Cincinnati situation with their head coach
Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor. Yes, I for some reason I want to say Zach Wilson.
I need
again.
to say it a couple
Zach
times so I don't
Zach
say Zach
Taylor,
Wilson
Zach
again.
Taylor. Yes, I think that whole situation was a little bit different. I think they saw, and listen, the Cincinnati Bengals, they ain't making no drastic moves because they don't want to have to pay nobody. We saw that with their last coach before Zach Taylor. He was there for 9-10 years.
Also,
probably.
not to be confused with Zach Morris.
Exactly.
He's not Zach Wilson. He's not Zach Morris.
Nor is he the former president, Zach Taylor.
Saved by the Bell. Isn't
Yes.
that right? Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Zach Taylor was in a situation where they saw that the team wasn't good, but they saw the development in the quarterback.
Also, not to be confused with Eric Taylor, Coach Taylor from Friday Night Lights.
Oh, you got a point there.
Yep.
Yes.
So look,
The
Zach
bunch of
Taylor.
Taylors
Taylor.
around here.
It's
Jake
a confusing
Taylor from
name.
Major
Bunch
League.
of Zachs around here. So they saw that he was developing the quarterback, not necessarily the team was getting better. So they held on to him. And it worked out for them. You know, he was able to have some some rapport with the kid coach. He knew the offense going into his second year after being hurt, getting hurt his first year. So he was ready to hit the ground running that second year because everything was familiar with him. I think it's so much, if indeed they draft Cam Ward, it's not about the record, I don't think. It's about, are you developing the quarterback? Do we see something? Because they know the roster isn't great. They know they have holes everywhere in this roster. And if the offensive line works out, if it hits, then I think that expedites the process for them. If that offensive line hits this year and they're able to protect the quarterback more times than not, then I think it expedites everything. But you got to understand and know that this roster isn't where it needs to be. But if we are developing a quarterback, if I see you developing a quarterback in a way that they saw you develop, they saw Zach Taylor develop Joe Burrow, then would I be more inclined to keep you on, knowing that the roster is going to get better the year after that, and another year within his offense, and you and him seem to be vibing, and y'all got a rapport, and he seems to be developing? Why would I change that based upon the record? I don't want to touch that. I want to leave him in that space. If he wins 5 games this year, but if they draft Cam Ward and Cam Ward looks like he's going to be that guy, I'm not changing coaching staffs. I'm just not.
I would also throw this layer in there, that if your mindset is, if we lose, we're changing the coach. If you lose Brian Callahan, you're also losing Bill Callahan, and you are developing a young offensive line as well. And so if you're thinking there's going to be progress there, or you're hoping that you have somebody who's considered one of the best offensive line coaches going, then that would be something to consider too, when you've got 2 young first-round picks that are still very much in the developmental stage that you're trying to bring out the best in. And that's just something that I would consider too on a secondary level.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Brian Callahan, Cam Ward, everything and anything. You let us know. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll have Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet's NHL Insider at 1 o'clock. But before we do, I have to address something that was said on these airwaves. I'm leaving Willie out of it. Willie doesn't have to do anything with it if he doesn't want to. But I'm going to address something that was said on these airwaves, and we'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game.
All right, let's talk League Company. Predators in action tonight in Dallas against one of the best teams in the NHL, the Dallas Stars. And action begins later tonight, 7 o'clock. And our coverage on the radio brought to you by League Company. League Company has a great system, and I'm sure they'll be very busy in the coming days and weeks with all that's going on in our city with the weather. But remember, general maintenance is part of their portfolio. So if you have some things going on, you can always give them a call, 615-567-1000 or leaguecompany.com. That's general maintenance at home or at work. And of course, they specialize in your air conditioning unit, your heating unit, plumbing system, and of course, your electrical system. So that is where they have the home maintenance plan, where you get the year-round coverage. A small monthly fee gets you discounts on repairs and annual checkups on those systems. They'll find the little problems before they become big problems. League Company, proud sponsor of the Nashville Predators, in business since 1944. It's leaguecompany.com or just give them a call, 615-567-1000.
streaky. They're all streaky. That's why you don't commit your team. You don't give your team to that guy. This UC Saros contract may be the goalie version of the Deshaun Watson contract. There's nothing you can do about it. You gave up the future asset in Askarov in order to make it work. And again, if he doesn't play better, there's no other choice. That's where we are with UC Saros.
Oh boy. I know Willie doesn't want me to engage, but I'm going to take a brief moment before we get to Elliot Freeman to just address this from Jared Stillman. So let me just set the stage for you. So Jared graced us with his presence yesterday and actually came in studio. It was picture day here at 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So Jared came to get some updated headshots and such, just as we all did. And I was in the studio adjacent to the one we're in right now, recording Preds Insiders with Nick Keyser. So Jared was in here. Nick and I were in there. And while we're recording the show, I hear Jared, through the wall yelling, muffled because it's...
Wow, you sound just like him.
Yes, that's more or less, that's what Jared sounds like sometimes when I'm listening to him talk. And then David James comes in and said, did you hear what Jared said? And showed me what we just played. Oh, boy. All right, I'm going to make this quick. I'm not going to argue that UC Saros has not had a bad season because he's had a bad season. It's been the worst season of his career. It's been the worst season of a lot of Predators players' career, UC Saros included. This idea that the UC Saros contract is the NHL equivalent of the Deshaun Watson contract. Oh boy, let's just start with this. Since joining the Browns, Deshaun Watson has started 19 games because of suspension and injuries. He's posted one of the lowest total QBRs in the NFL and has suffered consecutive season-ending injuries in 2023 and 2024. He mentioned you traded the future asset, right? Because they signed UC Saros, the Predators, you traded Yaroslav Askarov, who requested a trade. By the way, Yaroslav Askarov in 13 games and 12 starts for the Sharks this season, 4-6-2 with a .310 goals against average and an .896 save percentage. The Houston Texans received the Browns' 2022, 2023, and 2024 first-round picks, along with fourth-rounders in 2022 and 2024, and a third in 2023. So here's my point, and I think Joe Rexrode actually made this point quite well yesterday on Jared versus Joe because Nick Frazier asked this question. I think we all can agree that Deshaun Watson is cooked. Deshaun Watson is not a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL anymore. Again, consecutive season-ending injuries. He started just 19 games with the Browns since they gave him what might be the worst contract in the history of professional sports in North America. Right? We know that Deshaun Watson is done. UC Saros has had a bad season, but this is what Rexrode said yesterday. I'm not ready to declare that UC Saros is done as a starting caliber, Vezina Trophy caliber goalie in the NHL. So this season has been bad, no doubt about it. But I feel like this was not something that Jared was prepared to say, but it popped into his head, and he can't resist. But that is a whopper of a take from Jared Stillman, and he's had some.
Well, I told him yesterday because he when he came in, he was talking about the UC Saros. And my only thing, listen, I'm like you, Adam. He didn't play well this year. Everybody understands it. The team didn't play well, but this is about UC Saros. He didn't play well, and he needs to play better. But I mean, if you look out throughout the history of this game or any other game, can't a really good player to potential great player have a season where it's not a usual, consistently really good season? Isn't there room for, especially when the whole team is bad, where, your play may dip some? But is that indicative of who you are going to be as a player moving forward? Or is that, can you chalk it up as just one of those seasons? I'm more inclined to chalk it up as one of those seasons because I saw what he did before. So I'm projecting on what he will continue to be. He had a bad season this year. Nowhere around that. But I believe enough I've seen enough to say he's going to be better next year. So to me, this is no way near. And I mean, even with the back, the behind the off the field stuff, this is no way near a comparison to Deshaun Watson. Maybe it's just
I think what Jared's
he's been hypercritical. I don't know.
What Jared's point is that like the Deshaun Watson contract, the only thing that the Predators can hope for is that UC Saros bounces back from this season because they're stuck with his contract, which starts next season. It's 8 years long. He has no movement protection through most of it. So I understand that point, right? That the Predators have to hope that UC Saros bounces back. My argument is that I have more faith in UC Saros bouncing back than I have Deshaun Watson bouncing back. Deshaun Watson, as far as I'm concerned, is done. I cannot imagine a scenario where Deshaun Watson plays like a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Deshaun Watson had a worse QBR last season than Will Levis. So, and by the way, Gator Tim texts in and says, I agree with Jared on the Saros contract. He is the third worst goalie in the league. The Browns can get out of his contract. The Predators cannot get out of Saros's contract. They are stuck with him for 8 years.
The Browns can't get out of that contract.
Wait a
They still
minute.
got to pay him.
Where is he getting Saros is the third?
Let
worst
me.
goalie in the
All
league?
right. So here's
What are we talking about? This is the dumbest thing that's ever been said by Jared, and that's saying something.
I know.
honestly.
That's why I've kept you out of it, Willie. But this is where, and this is actually Gator Tim. Thank you for reminding me because I did want to say this as well. So where Gator Tim, I presume, is getting this from is that Jared went to moneypuck.com, which is an analytics site, and cited certain analytics that said that UC Saros is playing like the third worst goalie in the league. I find
and that's not an analytics site that has. It's not known for being the best analytics.
I
site.
find it incredibly rich, by the way, that Jared Stillman, who craps on analytics on a regular basis, uses analytics when it suits his purposes. And by the way, I went back and listened to this because I know this is something Jared would do. Jared had Aaron Schatz on his program at Super Bowl Radio Row. Aaron Schatz is at FTN Fantasy, Willie. That's where Aaron Schatz is right now. Aaron Schatz specializes in analytics. He is a leader in that space. Jared has Aaron Schatz on to talk about the Titans, introduces him. And literally the first thing that he says after introducing him is, so I am anti-analytics. That is a direct quote. So it is incredibly rich to me that Jared Stillman uses analytics to make his point about UC Saros when he craps on analytics whenever Willie and I or others bring up analytics. So that is where Gator Tim is saying that is getting the third worst goalie in the league.
Right, but also if you're going all analytics and you're anti-analytics, if you're anti-analytics, then you should be about the person as well. And if you're going to compare the person, Deshaun Watson, to the person UC Saros, then that's completely ridiculous. So he's wrong on all fronts, and I'm not going to waste my time making my argument again. He obviously does. I've made it before about why UC Saros has struggled, and a lot of it is on UC Saros. And of course, Jared conveniently comes to this after UC Saros had a bad game on Tuesday night. He didn't play well, and when he doesn't play well, I tell you he doesn't play well. But I also point out over the long haul for the season why it's been so tough. We brought in an analytics guy and a goalie guy at the same time.
Yes.
Kevin Woodley. And nobody should do 100% analytics or 100% eye test. It's a combination of the two that gives you the clearest picture of what's going on. Kevin Woodley has given you the clearest picture of what has gone on with UC Saros this year. Poor environment in front of him, lowest goal support in the league, and he hasn't played his best. In fact, he's had his worst year because he's been so good in all of his other years. He has been in the top 6 of the Vezina Trophy for 4 straight years going into this year. He won't be in there this year. The team has struggled. He has struggled. He is the least of their problems going forward. I stand by that. And if you want to make a big deal about the contract, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. This is before any goalie signs a contract going forward next year. He will be no higher than the 9th highest paid goalie in the league.
That
They act
sounds
like
right.
this contract. They act like this goalie contract is going to be an albatross. It's $8 million. It's $7.74 million. That's nothing. I did all the percentages. All I can do is give you the numbers that are accurate facts, right? If he wants it, but so if you want to listen to Jared with his hot air and his stuff that makes absolutely no sense at all and his ridiculous hyperbole, go ahead. Or you can listen to me or Kevin Woodley or Chris Mason, the people who actually know the game, study the game, give you a blend of analytics and eye test. So the choice is yours. That's all I'll say. That's the dumbest thing ever said on radio yesterday.
But I don't think nobody
Because,
complained.
Jared hyperboles a lot, and sometimes he's right. He's dead wrong on this one.
All right. We do have to get to Elliot Freeman. 615-737-1025. I was going to take it all from Willie, but I because when when David shared this, the first thing that Willie texted back was ignore. But I couldn't help myself.
That was my suggestion. I didn't want you to bring this up.
I know.
It's not worthy of airtime.
I know.
It's the dumbest thing ever. It's not worthy of discussion. You brought it up, so I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
I keep it quick.
615-737-1025. Let's get to Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL Insider. We'll talk about the Predators and the NHL. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
All right, let's talk Lone Pronto. Remember, Lone Pronto has what I've been telling you they've got for a long, long time, the ability to get you cash if you want to address your financial needs. And there could be a lot of needs for you to have thousands of dollars of cash readily available. It could be a home improvement project. It might just be you've got some bills to pay. So whichever one fits your category, just keep Lone Pronto in mind because they are the most efficient. They are the best at being able to get you that cash in a hurry with just a lot of convenience. No paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal. You can give them a call at 615-499-5780. If you got bills to pay, you got a financial project you need cash for, your home's equity, if you're a homeowner, is a great source of that. Lone Pronto is the engine to get you that money. LonePronto.com or 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780. LonePronto.com. Get that money you need. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Elliott Friedman, Sportsnet's NHL Insider, presented by Old National Bank. Get old. Elliott, the great chase is on Alex Ovechkin, 3 goals from becoming the NHL's all-time leading goal scorer, breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. I had the privilege of covering Alex Ovechkin's career when I first started out in this business. And there was a period of time, Elliott, and I know you remember this as well, where Ovechkin seemed to be slowing down. Now, slowing down to Ovechkin is scoring 35, 40 goals instead of scoring 50 goals or 60 goals. But what he's been able to do in his career at this stage of his career to get to the precipice of history near the end of this season is astounding. What has impressed you most about Ovechkin this season, particularly as we step on the doorstep of history?
Well, the fact that he's even right here, right now, Adam, like I think when he got hurt, I don't think anybody believed that this was going to happen this season. And not only does it look like it's going to happen this season, but it doesn't even look like it's going to come down right down to the wire. And it's interesting. We talked on the pod this week about MVP candidates, and someone sent me a note and said, how can Ovechkin not be considered an MVP candidate this year? The pace he's scoring at, and the fact the Capitals are the number 2 team in the league. And the more I thought about it, the more I kind of agreed. But I just think the fact that he's here this year, like if you go back to last season, Adam, there was a point where I think people wondered if this was ever going to happen. That maybe he slowed down, as you said, and maybe Gretzky was safe after all. I think a couple of things changed. Obviously, he's had an enormous year, but I do think the fact the Capitals have been a good team has really energized him. Last year, they made the playoffs. They got wiped out in the first round, but they had a real awful start to the year. They looked terrible. And I think there was a point last year where it looked like they were more of a threat to finish last than make the playoffs. But I think the winning has energized him. I think obviously he's energized too. And I think it's incredible that we're even talking about this now after the broken leg. I didn't think there was any way we were going to see this after the broken leg.
And we're at the point now where Gary Bettman is basically traveling with the Capitals, and Wayne Gretzky too, if I'm not mistaken, not actually with the Capitals, but
I think
he's following
going
along.
to join. Yeah, I think Gretzky's going to join. I wouldn't be surprised if he's there tomorrow night because, the other thing you look at here, Adam, is the Capitals' schedule. They're kind of home, road. Like they're home tomorrow night, and then they go on the road Sunday against the Islanders, a team he scored on a ton. Now, I remember asking them a few weeks ago, if Ovechkin gets close, you're going to sit him. And they said, we wouldn't do that. And I don't think he even let us do it anyway. But that there's, like it's Chicago tomorrow night. They're a young team. They're not really that great. They don't defend great. You got to think that home fan base. I was joking today. I was doing a hit in Winnipeg, and I was like, he might play 45 minutes tomorrow night. So I really, you can tell that they're going to do everything they can to try to get this done at home. I have a feeling.
Elliott, a lot of Predators fans are paying attention to the upcoming draft lottery. The Predators eliminated from postseason contention. Predators fans hope that this terrible season leads to them being able to draft a game-changing player. There are 2 forwards at the top of this draft, James Higgins and Michael Misa. Now, I know that your expertise is not necessarily focusing on the prospects, but you do talk to a lot of people around the league, a lot of people who study these prospects. When you talk to people about James Higgins and Michael Misa, what do you hear from people in the know?
Well, I would actually say to you that there are people like our draft guys. We've got 2 guys, Sam Cosentino and Jason Bukala, who do our draft. And they actually add a 3rd forward to that, Porter Martone. Now, James Higgins plays at Boston College, and Michael Misa, he plays in the Ontario Hockey League at Saginaw. And Porter Martone also plays in the Ontario Hockey League in Brampton. And they believe that those three forwards, along with the one defenseman who's at the top of the draft, his name is Matthew Schaefer, are sort of like the top four. So I would say to Predators fans, in addition to the two players that Adam just mentioned, Higgins and Misa, you should familiarize yourself with Martone too, because a lot of people put him up in the same class. I think this. I think, Higgins is the guy who was getting a lot of the attention because I think for a while he was kind of seen as a potential number one pick and a little bit ahead of some of those other guys. He's tremendously skilled. And I think the fact that the other two names have caught up to him or are in the same breath of him is not necessarily because of anything bad that Higgins has done, but just because of how much that those two other guys have surged. The one thing about Michael Misa is a few years ago in Ontario and Canada, they started something called exceptional status. They allowed kids to start, like, for a time, if you were kind of like 16 years old or younger or right around that cutoff, I don't remember the exact age, you weren't allowed to play junior hockey in one of the big leagues, Ontario, Quebec, or the West. And they said, sorry, you have to be a certain age. Well, it got to a point where for some of the best players at that age, they were threatening to go play in other leagues. And these junior leagues, they made a business decision to say, okay, we're going to create exceptional status. And it started with John Tavares. I think he was the first one. Like, he was such a good player at such a young age that they said, okay, we're going to create a window where players on your level are going to be able to get in. And they don't do it every year. There's only been, I think there's less than 10 players who've gotten it. It's around that number. And again, if I'm a little bit off, please forgive me. But Michael Misa is one of the players who got that exceptional status.
And some of the other ones, by the way, Connor Bedard was given exceptional status. Connor McDavid was given exceptional status, just for context.
Yes. So thank you, Adam, for helping bail me out on this.
No problem.
But Michael Misa was one of the players who was given exceptional status a couple of years ago. And at the beginning, it was a bit of an adjustment. He's a young guy. It happens. But over the last year and a half, you've really started to see the ability. And, Michael Misa there were a number of shocking decisions this year for the Canadian team at the World Juniors. Michael Misa was one of them. He wasn't put on the team, and they lost early. And that was a big flashpoint the moment it happened. People are like, Canada's going to regret this. And they did. And he wasn't the only one, but he was one of the biggest ones. And nothing that he has done since that tournament has convinced anyone that it was the right decision to leave him off the team. So he's a really, really talented young guy. And Martone is the other one I'd watch too. He's in that group. So it's those three guys you're going to be looking at if Nashville gets a top 4 pick. And I know right now that you guys are in the number 3 position.
Number 3 position. And so the way the lottery works, and I've been trying to study up on the details of this, Elliot, and it's been rare that the Predators have been in this because I think they've only picked in the top 5 twice by my recollection. Seth Jones was 4th overall in 2013, and then the very, very first year that they were in the league,
David Legwand,
they lost the lottery and they picked 2nd. Actually, they moved up, if I remember, to get to 2nd. They traded up to get to David Legwand as the 2nd pick. They haven't had a top 5 pick other than that. But if you're 3rd, and it looks very likely that they will end up in that 30th overall spot, which means they could move up to 1, and they couldn't fall lower than 5, correct?
Yeah, so they changed the rules a couple of years ago. They changed the rules a couple of years ago because they didn't like the way they were becoming so random. Like, the team that really hated it was Detroit because they had a number of bad years in a row, and they kept on getting hosed. So they kind of changed the. They weren't the only one who was upset, but Detroit was one of the ones that got hurt the most. So basically, the way it works is a team cannot move up more than 10 points in the lottery, and only 2 picks are determined by the lottery, 1 and 2. So that means you're right. You can't really have teams dropping like they used to. Like there used to be some teams that really used to drop. You can't. So you have the drawing for 1, then you have the drawing for 2, and then everybody slots in after that. So the maximum you can drop is 2 spots. But if somebody who, for example, is 13th wins it, they can't go to number 1 because you can only go up to 10 spots.
You made some interesting comments about the forwards up there. I think what would be interesting is it does seem like everything that I've read from different sources is that Schaefer, the one defenseman, is the clear-cut number 1. And that would be something. Obviously, the Predators need everything right now. That Barry Trotz has been just coveting a number 1 center for a long time. But it would be interesting if you were to win the lottery and the best player available by consensus is Schaefer. Do you take the defenseman? Because I think you could argue that they need a defenseman, going forward just as much as the center, even though the center has been the more elusive thing to find in franchise history.
Well, Willie, I look at what's happening in front of you, and I see 2 very different things. It depends to me, like San Jose, Chicago, right? Like if San Jose wins the lottery and goes first, and right now as we sit here today, they're the last place team in the league. They're 2 points lower than Chicago. Like you can never have enough offense. I really do believe that. But you have Celebrini and you have Smith, right?
Right.
And you have Eklund. Like I look at them on the blue line, and sometimes I think when you take need at the top of the draft, you can really walk yourself into trouble where you don't need to. But if you evaluate all guys equally, I could see San Jose saying we need a defenseman more than we need a forward, and then you have Chicago, which is at 31st right now, so they have the 2nd pick. Like they got a lot of D, they got a lot of young D. Like they took Lev Shunov last year, was the 2nd overall pick, and they have other defensemen, including some of the guys they're debuting right now who are who we're starting to see play, like Sam Renzel, one of the kids that just made his debut this week. I could see Chicago saying, we have young defensemen. We need some more young players who can play with Bedard. And so, does it mean they go that way? No, it doesn't, because like I said, I do think sometimes if you draft for need, you can really make mistakes. But again, if all things are equal, I could see San Jose leaning defense and Chicago leaning forward. So depending on where it all ends up, I mean, the decisions could be made in front of you. You could say, I think, let's just say it stays the same. I would be surprised if Schaefer got down to 3, just because of the way everybody talks about him. But I could see you guys having a pick between 2 of Misa, Higgins, and Martone. I could definitely see that.
Yep. And I think Nashville would be excited for that. One other reference point, and Elliot, as you probably know, the Titans have the 1st overall pick, and we've had endless discussions about, is this a great year to have the 1st pick? How good are these prospects, especially at quarterback, compared to past years and the quarterbacks that are at the top of those draft classes? The same discussion happens every year in the NHL. For example, the Nashville draft a couple of summers ago that you were at has turned out to be exactly what it was hyped up to be, right? Very good. A lot of good prospects. In fact, Nashville just signed Matthew Wood. He's not going to play tonight, but he skated with the team for the first time today here in Dallas. So it's great to see him.
Not surprisingly, like all this craziness is leading into all the immigration issues. I guess they got to get that sorted out. So
yes, and that's not. It's not
that
done
will
yet.
happen fast.
Yeah, they're hoping it happens sooner than later, but he's not going to be in the lineup tonight. But how would you rate this draft class? I'm hearing it's not as loaded as other years, and maybe next year looks a little bit better. But what are you hearing along those lines in general?
I think that's true, Willie. I think that in overall depth, next year is better than this year. I think that's true. I think there were some teams later in the first round who were more comfortable giving up draft picks this year as opposed to next year. So I would overall, Willie, agree with that. However, if you go into the top if you go into that top 4, if you end up in that spot, you're going to be really happy with one of those players. Like I said, our 2 draft guys really like those four players. They like Schaefer, they like Misa, they like Higgins, and they like Martone. So they think if you're in the top 4, you're slightly a cut above. Now, the interesting guy, and again, I don't follow these players as closely as our draft gurus do. I just don't have the time. So I want to be careful about how I say this, but there's a really interesting guy. Like basically, if you go to NHL.com, they rank their scouting service, Central Scouting, ranks all the players, and they go by they sort of go by North American skater, international skater, North American goalie, and international goalie. And I stress on these that the one thing you have to be careful with is they don't do this with the benefit of any in-person interviews. They don't do that. They simply rank them as players, what they see. But it's always good to get an idea of what they're thinking of. The guy who's number 5 on their list right now is a player is a player by the name of McQueen, Roger McQueen. And, you know, for example, Don Sweeney, the Bruins GM, and it's really unbelievable when you think about it, that the Boston Bruins are in last place in the Eastern Conference. Like even 2 months ago, who would have thought that this would have been even possible? But this player, Roger McQueen, who's ranked 5th, he plays in the Western Hockey League for Brandon. He's a really interesting guy in the sense that there are some teams are spending a lot of time looking at him right now. It's been a little up and down. There's been a split. There are some teams who think very highly of him. There are some teams who are uncertain. And again, this is not my expertise, so I'm always careful about this stuff. But whoever has the 5th pick, it's going to be a very interesting decision with him because it sounds like there's a real split on where teams think his ceiling is. So it's top 4, then a really interesting guy in McQueen, and then we'll see.
Elliot, real quick, we're a little short on time, but with what the Blues did, we just saw a lot of the Blues the last couple of weeks, and they're on fire. And they famously signed the 2 restricted free agents last year, and they both played great. Do you think there will be a lot more offer sheets this summer?
I think that there's noise about it, yes. It's always a question as to whether or not it's real or it's just noise. And you know, one of the things that I think is interesting is there's going to be more cap room, Willie, because the cap is going up. So some teams say to me, everyone's just going to match. The one thing I'm curious about, Willie, is does a team say, okay, we're going to do a 1-year poison pen where teams don't have cap room, and then we'll worry about extending that player later. That's the one I'm curious about because some teams will have some cap room for that, and there will be teams who are vulnerable for that. And I'll say this. I had one GM telling me, seeing the success of those 2 players in St. Louis, he said to me, my owners asked a bit about us doing that.
Elliot Friedman, Sportsnet NHL Insider, joining us on D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, presented by Old National Bank. Elliot, thank you so much for your time. As always, we'll talk next week.
All right, guys. Have a good week.
You as well. Elliot Friedman, always a pleasure. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, We're 2 days out from the Final Four, and I want us to all touch on something that's been a big talking point about this NCAA tournament. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
And your point about money is really good. Like money and education and money and love of the game are not mutually exclusive. So I hear from people all the time. We'll be talking about another thing and go, "Hey, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe what this mid-major player asked us for the other day. He asked us for $2 million." I'm going, "Okay, well, is he worth $2 million? Hell no." Why are you offended by that? Like if I drove my car into your driveway and said, "Hey, I want to sell you my car for $2 million," what would you tell me? And you go, "I tell you to go F yourself." And I said, "Well, I don't think you should say that to the player, but say to the player, here's what we've got available to you. Here's the offer we're willing to make. If you can get $2 million somewhere else, we don't want to stop you from that." You know, they'll say, "Well, we don't even know what the market is." You know what the player's worth to you. So make the offer that's worth it to you. And if there's a counter that's within reason, then you can discuss it. If somebody's asking for this astronomical amount, you know they're not worth, isn't it just time to move on from that person?
That was ESPN college basketball analyst Jay Billis talking about the transfer portal in the NCAA. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Final Four begins on Saturday. As you know, it's number one versus number one versus number one versus number one. Florida versus Auburn in one semifinal, Houston and Duke in the other national semifinal on Saturday in San Antonio. And I thought there was a really interesting story, guys, in The Athletic, written by Ralph D. Russo, with the headline, "Thanks to the transfer portal, this March's Cinderella stories are players, not teams." And we've heard quite a bit over the course of this tournament, people lamenting the lack of Cinderella stories in this tournament. The fact that all 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. Where art thou, Loyola Chicago, Florida Atlantic? If you want to go back even further, Butler. Like, those are the teams that excite casual fans about March Madness. I, on the other hand, love the fact that the top 4 teams by far in this country will be playing for a national championship Saturday and Monday. But Ralph Russo mentions in the article that 2 of the very best players competing for a championship this weekend would not be where they are today if not for the new world order of college sports. That's Walter Clayton out of Florida and Johni Broome out of Auburn. I mean, how many of you know that Johni Broome spent multiple years at Morehead State before transferring to Auburn?
Belmont fans know.
Belmont fans certainly do know.
He kept them out of the tournament one of the years, for sure.
Walter Clayton played at Iona for Rick Pitino and had a tournament game with Iona. And has turned into an absolute clutch player for the Gators, as you've seen a couple of times in this tournament. But I do think, Willie, this is an interesting idea that the Cinderella stories, according to Ralph Russo of The Athletic, are not the teams because of the transfer portal. It's the players.
Yeah, I guess that's cute. I don't know if that makes it for exciting TV viewing, because I think going back to the Jerry Seinfeldism of we root for the clothes, right? It's more fun for Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago and the fun, McNeese State, which we didn't see that much of this year. McNeese State was one of the bigger upsets, and they were what, a 12 seed?
A 12 against Clemson.
Yeah. You want to see those massive upsets. Fairleigh Dickinson, those are the fun things, more so than an individual player moving up the ranks behind the scenes. But that is definitely a big dynamic. I think what we're learning is just like you would expect, guys develop at different rates. I'm sure when Michael Clayton was 18 years old, he wasn't as good as he is now. And to his credit, he developed a ton between ages 18 and 20. And all of a sudden, he became a more attractive player. And Florida was smart enough to see the growth and go get him. And they had to have money to do that. It's not as fun and sexy a story, but it is the story. So the article is dead on. That is a huge trend, but it's why we're seeing less big upsets in the tournament, and we're probably going to continue to see less because teams are only going to get better at identifying the mid-major players who can help major college teams, because that's going to be the case every year.
The story notes, Derek, that this year's Final Four teams have 20 scholarship transfers from other NCAA schools on their roster. Auburn leads with 7, Florida has 6, Duke has 5, and Houston has 2, both from other Big 12 programs. Cougar star LJ Cryer is in the Final Four for the second time after being part of Baylor's 21 title team as a freshman. Florida, Auburn, and Duke all have at least one starter who once played at a mid-major.
Florida's got Will Richard, who played at Belmont for a year.
So Florida would have Clayton, Auburn would have Broom, and Duke has Sion James, who was at Tulane before he transferred to Duke.
Because if you look at the sort of the history of Cinderella teams, making a truly deep run. And I don't think this year's, because when we're talking about Cinderella teams, what are we talking? 16, 15, 14.
Usually
13.
a double digit. I think you 13, have to be at least 12. A double digit seed. What would you say the threshold is, Willie? 11 and under? Or would you even put 10 in there as well?
No, I can't put 10 in there. The way these teams are seeded now and how good the 10th seed, I mean, Arkansas was the 10th seed, and they end up being toward the end of the season, they became a really good team. So for me, I think it's 12 and under.
I would say 11. I would go 11 and under. What about you, Willie? What would you put the threshold for a Cinderella?
Cinderella to get to the Final Four, I would say 11 and up. The true Cinderella, I think what we remember a lot is, the 13 and ups pulling the big upset early. Those teams don't often get past the second round, let alone the Sweet 16. So there's different levels of Cinderella. I think Loyola Chicago getting to the Final Four, that was a great Cinderella
What was
story,
St.
right?
Peter's, a 14? What was St. Peter's?
I think they were a 15,
okay.
but I don't think they got past the Sweet 16. I don't think they got to the Final 8, did they? Or did they get the Final 8?
So when you're talking about Cinderella teams, let's just say we go from 12 on down, 13, 14, 15, 16.
St. Peter's went to the Elite 8 in 2022 as a 15 seed.
As a 15. Wow, that's Cinderella-ish, no question.
Yeah, that's truly Cinderella. But you don't find these teams doing this on the. I would almost believe wholeheartedly that the numbers are not even in the teens. And but it depends on what do they consider a Cinderella team. Is it 10 through 16? Is it 12 through 16? Is it 13 through 16? What do you consider a true Cinderella team? So, but I don't think the numbers are so large that, oh my goodness, we're not going to see it anymore. I think we're still going to continue, because this is what happens. They don't know you're a good player until you show you're a good player. Those teams are not coming to look for you if you're averaging 1 point per game or 2 points per game or 3 points per game. Or what you're doing is not even scratching. It's just like it's not registering on scale. It's not. If you are going to move up, that means more than likely you were the best player on your mid-major team. And we saw that, like the world saw it. And then you were able to transfer and move up to potentially be a starter somewhere else. Because nobody knew about Chaz. Nobody knew about Chaz. Until when? Until he started showing that he can play at this level.
Dalton Connect,
the same thing. So I still believe you will have your fair share of Cinderella teams. Why? Because those guys that want to move up, they got to show first that they can move up. And typically they show it what? During the tournament.
Quickly, let's get to Scott in Hendersonville on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Scott, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, I think one thing to really look at, especially Auburn in the Final Four, to differentiate, it's not just getting portal players that were good, like Broom was all league in his league, but they've excelled at getting the multiple year transfer, and a lot of those guys weren't quote unquote stars. The Denver Jones, Chaney Johnson, came in and was at the end of the bench, and I don't even know what they saw in him, but he was a workout warrior who kind of transformed himself. So you look at teams like Arkansas, which arguably had more talent come in through the transfer portal, or Kentucky, which Kentucky it's a one-time deal, but they were all there for 1 year. I think the model should be, or the smart money is to try to get guys in that are multiple year transfers, because this is the same Auburn team that lost to Yale last year. So, the difference is they had time to develop and grow together. And I think it's going to, you don't want to do the quote unquote Calipari one and done deal of just going out and buying the best mid majors every year, because I don't think that will work ultimately as well as putting together a team that can play together for 2 or 3 years.
Interesting call,
it's
Scott.
a good point. And
Thank you for
Auburn
the call.
is old. They're older, right? They have a lot of seniors, a lot of guys that are fifth-year seniors. So that's a good point. And so that's the best of both worlds. If you can get older guys that are been with you for a couple years, that's good evaluation. So the whole formula has changed rapidly, and just in the last 2 or 3 years.
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on the NCAA tournament. The Final Four continues Saturday with the national semifinals. But coming up next, this transfer portal conversation, it hit home the other day. Let's discuss that coming up next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I also want to tell everybody that the Atlanta Braves country road trip is coming to town and teaming up with the Predators and 102.5 The Game. Join us at the BetMGM Sports Lounge inside Bridgestone Arena on Wednesday, April 16th for a Braves watch party as they take on the Tampa Bay Rays at noon. There will be free giveaways like hats and t-shirts, plus you could win autographed baseballs and free tickets. For more details, visit theGameNashville.com/events. And by the way, Willie, Chase, a noted Braves fan, did come in here and tell us that the Braves may be providing us with some Braves jerseys, and he really hopes you wear one.
You have to. It ain't no really hope. It's required that you wear it.
I need to check my contract on that one.
I think it's a show requirement.
It's a show requirement. You have to wear the Braves jersey.
And speaking of that, the Braves, man, what a rough start. They play two unbelievably hot teams right now, the Padres and the Dodgers, who have combined to lose 0 games. The Padres and Dodgers are,
so you say,
both undefeated, and they have victimized the Braves. Last night, Shohei Ohtani and a walk-off homer to cap off a comeback where the Braves were up 5-0 early in the game. So the Braves are going through it right now. I think they'll come around and be right in it before it's all over. You've got 3 wild cards now. They got plenty of time to fix it, but man, what a tough start to the season.
Absolutely. And I just want to pass this along as well before we continue on. In case you missed it, the National Weather Service, I should say, the Storm Prediction Center, issued a tornado watch for portions of western and middle Tennessee, among other regions, effective as of 12:50 this afternoon until 10 o'clock tonight. Primary threats include a few tornadoes likely with a couple of intense tornadoes possible, scattered, damaging wind gusts to 70 miles an hour likely, scattered large hail events to 1.5 inches in diameter possible. So although we did have a big storm last night, the possibility exists for more storms. Our region is under a tornado watch, which is not as severe as a tornado warning, but just keep that in mind as you go throughout your day. So I wanted to end the show. Speaking of the transfer portal, we played that clip from Jay Bilas, and I think that applies to what we saw at Vanderbilt recently. Jason Edwards, Vanderbilt's leading scorer this past season, he's portaling, he's out. And Gentry Estes wrote a column at the Tennessean about it. Jason Edwards' about face from Vanderbilt basketball is common in the transfer portal era. So let's turn it over to our resident Commodore, Willie. I would love your thoughts on this situation with Jason Edwards.
I think the Bilas comment is an interesting backdrop to all of this because Bilas has been very pro player. He loves to point out the double standard of a coach being able to leave whenever, and the players have never been able to have that freedom. But it's almost like the 1970s and early 80s in baseball when the pendulum swung from, the owners controlling everything with player movement to all of a sudden the players years later, they almost had way too much power and maybe didn't realize how well they had it. And so I still think we've got to work towards, in college sports, a little better balance that works for everybody. Everybody's a free agent every year. I think his point is a good one because this is what happened with Edwards, right? A player comes in and says, I think I'm worth X. Let's say the number is 1.5, 1.7 million. And the coach in Vanderbilt says, well, I'm looking at our budget and where you fit, and we think you're worth 1 million. And I don't know the specific numbers, but I've talked to a lot of people about Edwards, and I think that's in the ballpark. Now, Edwards, for those that aren't Vanderbilt fans, he was a second team, I think, all SEC player. I think he ended up being their leading scorer.
He did.
Vanderbilt really did it by committee, right? If you took a look, Edwards was kind of an instant offense kind of guy. He has flaws in his game. He's not a big guy. He's not a defensive stopper. And he was taken out of a lot of games and situations late in games where they went offense and defense. But he obviously was a huge reason why they went to the NCAA tournament. He's been at a number of different schools. He was at North Texas last season.
The Mean Green.
A total unknown, right? And then comes to Vanderbilt and makes a big name for himself, and now is clearly looking to cash in. Now, my viewpoint might be different than Jay Bilas's or Jason Edwards or plenty of other people. I think that staying where you fit, even if it's to take a little bit less. And, oh, by the way, if anybody gives a you-know-what about the value of a degree at Vanderbilt, I don't know if anybody cares where they graduate from now or not. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are. They chase the money. That's fine. That's your choice. But Jason Edwards wants to maximize what he's worth. And as Jay Billis points out, it's what the market will bear, right? And so good for him. If he can get $2 million to go somewhere else, okay, that's great. That's the rule now. I just sometimes think the players don't think on a second or third level of what is the best decision for you, rather than what's the maximum amount of dollars that I can get to play next year. But that is college basketball right now. And I think Vanderbilt has said, okay, go ahead. Just like Jay Billis said, go ahead, see if you can find it. We're going to work with the $1 million or million, whatever, and we'll find whatever our budget is. We'll find somebody who can be equally as good. We'll see how it turns out for both parties.
By the way, Derek, so in that podcast, that was, by the way, Ryan Russillo's podcast. He had Jay Billis on to preview the Final Four. Jay Billis also mentioned, when Jay Billis played back in the day, people would come up to him and said, there was much more loyalty in your day. And Jay Billis's response was, we didn't have a choice.
Exactly.
We didn't have a choice but to be loyal. There was no player empowerment, so to speak.
Just like a baseball player in the 1970s couldn't do because there was no free agency. There wasn't such a thing.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, if he wants to go out and capitalize on his ability to play the game, then so be it. Because I think a lot of these young men and women are starting to understand that because it's true, there are X amount of athletes in each year's graduating class. And in their respective sports, I'm sure the numbers are very low when it comes to that man or woman actually playing on a professional team. So these student athletes or athletic students are looking at it from, I need to maximize my ability to make 7 figures while I can. And I still get a degree. A degree at Vandy, I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's great. And I wish my degree was from Vandy if under different circumstances. Or like my son went to Boston University. I wasn't smart enough to get in Boston University, nor was I smart enough to get in Vandy either. But these kids are starting to understand that, man, I may not make it to the NBA. I may not make it to the WNBA. I may not make it to the NFL. And I'm sure the numbers are even lower in the NBA and WNBA as it is in the NFL. I more than likely will not make it there. So what do? I maximize my ability to make money now. And if it means that I transfer every other year or every year, I believe as long as I'm doing what I need to do in the classroom, getting my credits, and those credits then transferring so I can graduate in 4 or 5 years, then I think you can't fault them for that. Now, I'm not saying that all kids have that sort of forward thinking, but I'm sure a lot of them do, because they're like, I can't make this much money and I'm not going to the NBA, the NFL, WNBA, MLB. That's not me. So I need to make the money now.
The question is he going to get what his people, his agent is telling him he can get, or what he basically said, it will take this to keep me at Vanderbilt? Can he get it there? Because the market is blind, right? There's not.
I'm not leaving him unless I have a guarantee. This is what I'm getting.
Is he that good? I don't know. If he can, great for him, because it all sounds great. Maximize what you get.
Yeah.
If you're worth what you think you're worth, is somebody going to give him $2 million or $1.7 million? I don't know if he's that good. He's a good player. Is he that good? We'll find out.
That'll do it for us today. Willie, come back from Big D already. We miss you. Predators and Stars tonight at 7. Pregame at 6. But before that, Stillman and Company coming up next.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, wonderful day. Stay out of this rain. Stay dry. Peace.